Imagine possessing, like, the ultimate superpower. You know, you have the ability to see the exact future before it even
Right,
happens.
which sounds amazing on paper.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
then you realize it's actually entirely useless to you because you are, like, utterly powerless to change anything that you see.
Oh, that is just the worst
It
feeling.
really is. You're basically strapped into the passenger seat, just forced to watch this car crash happen in slow motion over and over again. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a really gripping fictional narrative about a teenage girl named Scarlett.
Or Scar, as she's known in the story.
Yeah, Scar. And her supernatural gift is honestly, it's an agonizing psychological trap. We're going to unpack how this story brilliantly uses that trope of a paranormal seer to explore some incredibly grounded, really gritty themes.
Yeah, things like severe family trauma, the crushing weight of anxiety, and just the brutal reality of teenage isolation.
It totally flips the traditional origin story on its head. I mean, usually when a character discovers they have a gift, it's this empowering moment, right? They find their agency.
Right, they put on a cape and go save the day.
Exactly. But for Scarlett, her ability is just this source of profound helplessness. And the story starts right in the thick of that helplessness. We don't meet Scarlett in a moment of triumph. We meet her jolting awake in absolute sheer terror.
Yeah, her alarm clock is just blaring, but her brain is so trapped in this lingering, horrific nightmare that she physically mistakes the sound of the alarm for a crashing airplane.
Which is wild. The physiological response she's having before she even, like, opens her eyes is intense. She's panting. Her heart is just thundering in her chest.
The bed sheets are tangled around her legs like physical restraints.
Yes. It's a perfect depiction of how trauma impacts the nervous system. Her body literally doesn't know the difference between the threat in her dream and the reality of her bedroom. She is in a state of maximum hyperarousal before her day even begins.
And the transition from that psychological terror into her waking reality offers absolutely no relief. She manages to open her eyes, she squints at her phone, and the very first thing she sees is a pair of strange eyes staring right back at her from across the pillow.
And before she can even process it, she is viciously attacked, claws straight to the face.
By the family cat.
Yes, which is such a darkly comedic, just chaotic detail to start the day. The cat's original name was Max, right?
Right, but Scarlett renamed him Cuts for a very literal reason.
Because this animal just habitually shreds plants, pillows, and, you know, occasionally the people in the house. And the most tragically ironic part of this whole cat situation is that Cuts was originally recommended by a psychiatrist to help Scarlett's mother manage her severe anxiety.
Is a brilliant detail. It speaks volumes about this family's dynamic. I mean, an intervention meant to soothe the mother's mental illness has just introduced a literal physical danger into the daughter's morning routine.
Wow, yeah. The adults' coping mechanisms are actively harming the children.
Exactly. Scarlett actually has to keep a pair of old, thick garden gloves in her closet just to fend this animal off. She is literally putting on physical armor the second she wakes up.
It really feels like she's built this heavily fortified castle for herself. I mean, if you look at how her bedroom is described, it is a highly specific sanctuary.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
She's got these funky paint swatches everywhere, glow-in-the-dark fairies stuck to the ceiling.
Yeah, and that frosted lantern shaped like a flower with a little fairy inside. She literally calls it a magical forest. It's this incredibly vibrant, colorful space designed to keep the cold, dark anxieties of the outside world completely at bay.
But the real tragedy of that castle is that the true dangers are already locked inside the walls with her. She can shut her bedroom door against the rest of the house, but Cuts the cat is in there. And more importantly, her own mind is in there.
Right. There's no escaping that.
No, there isn't. And that bedroom is actually functioning as a time capsule. It represents this treasured memory of decorating with her mother years ago, before the shadow of, constant hospital visits and frowning doctors just completely consumed their lives.
It's a monument to the version of her mother she lost to mental illness, even though her mother is physically still sitting downstairs.
Exactly. And that contrast between the room and how Scarlett actually presents herself to the world is staggering. Inside that room, everything is magical and bright. But out in the real world, her outside persona is entirely muted.
Yeah, plain clothes, plain hair, quiet voice. She desperately wants to be invisible.
She's actively hiding her color because any kind of visibility brings attention to the trauma she's carrying around.
And she's hiding because her mind isn't just dealing with normal teenage anxiety, you know. Her brain actively hijacks her reality through these visions. The text breaks her abilities down into two distinct mechanics, right?
Yeah, she has daytime premonitions and nighttime prophetic dreams. And the daytime ones, they just sound like a neurological short circuit.
They really do. It's completely involuntary. She could be standing in the middle of a crowded school cafeteria, mid-conversation, and suddenly she just goes misty-eyed. Her words trail off, she stares into the middle distance, and she completely loses time.
Just imagine the social mortification of that happening in a high school.
It's a nightmare. It's the primary reason she struggles to keep any friends. I mean, no one wants to sit with the girl who randomly goes catatonic, so the student body simply labels her the witch girl and completely ostracizes her.
The daytime premonitions destroy her social life. But the nighttime prophetic dreams, those are what actively destroy her psyche. Because unlike, a clean, objective vision of the future, her dreams are highly symbolic and deeply contaminated by her own subconscious.
So they aren't just straight prophecies.
No, not at all. She explicitly states that her own vivid imagination bleeds into the prophecies. It causes them to run completely off the rails. She has to experience the sensory overload of a nightmare without even knowing if it's actually going to happen.
We get a really visceral example of this with her recurring nightmare. She's walking down the dark corridors of her school. Rain is violently battering the windows. The wind sounds like a screaming woman.
It's so creepy.
It's so creepy. She walks into the cafeteria, and it's decorated for Halloween, but it's completely morbid. Hanking skeletons, black cats, and rows of twisted, distorted bodies covering the floor.
And then she moves to the gem, right?
Yeah, and there's a witch prop stirring a cauldron. But when she gets close to it, she realizes someone has replaced the witch's fake face with a picture of her own face. And then the lights start flashing in unison like an airport runway, accompanied by this deafening roar.
The symbolism is just dense and oppressive. The twisted bodies in the cafeteria, the airport runway lights, which we know directly link back to the sound of her alarm clock.
Long from the beginning.
Exactly. But that image of the witch prop with her own face taped to it, that is the most striking visual in the entire sequence.
Okay, wait, let's look at those dreams for a second, because this is where we really have to question the reliability of the narrator. If Scarlett is a literal seer, why is her subconscious relying on cheap high school movie tropes like goblins and witches to deliver a prophecy?
That is the big question.
Right. Scarlett admits her imagination messes with the visions. So I have to ask you and the listener, really, how much of this twisted Halloween disaster is an actual, literal future event that she needs to prevent, and how much of it is just the deeply internalized anxiety of a teenager terrified of being an outcast?
It's a fantastic point.
It sounds less like a magical prophecy and way more like her fear of being mocked by the whole school, manifesting as a literal witch with her face on display.
That ambiguity is the core of her agony. The text completely validates exactly what you're asking. Scarlett herself rarely knows if it's a normal nightmare driven by anxiety or if it's a genuine prophecy.
That sounds exhausting.
She's constantly struggling to untangle objective future reality from subjective psychological terror. Usually she only decodes the dream after a disaster has already struck.
Which must just fill her with guilt.
A profound, completely unearned sense of guilt, yeah.
Mm.
And because her mind is such an unreliable, chaotic place, she relies on a very rigid coping mechanism to create some kind of order.
Her diaries. She has kept these color-coded diaries since she learned how to write.
Yes. And this is where the narrative really shifts from a supernatural thriller into a devastating, almost clinical portrait of generational trauma. She uses blue markers specifically to track the days her mom is taken to the hospital.
Think about the psychology of that for a second. Why do we track trauma with spreadsheets or color coding? We do it because it turns unpredictable emotional chaos into predictable data.
Exactly.
She's trying to press the trauma flat onto the page just to feel some tiny semblance of control over a life where she feels entirely helpless.
It is a survival tactic, plain and simple. And the history behind those blue marker days is incredibly dark. When Scarlett was younger, her father would literally drag her out of bed in the middle of the night, shove her into her coat and boots, and load her into the back of the car for these frantic midnight runs to the psych ward.
And the only reason her dad dragged a young child to a hospital at midnight was because the alternative was worse. He didn't want to leave her at home with her grandmother, Grandma Telsa,
Who terrified Scarlett even more than the psychiatric hospital did.
The dynamic in that car is so incredibly sad to me. The father is driving, he's overwhelmed, singularly focused on his wife's crisis, so he completely tunes out the manic things his wife is actually saying. He just assumes young Scarlett is sleeping in the back seat.
But children in traumatic environments rarely sleep.
No, they don't.
They listen, they absorb everything. And Scarlett is listening to her mother speak a mile a minute, mumbling these horrifying dark stories right into the rearview mirror.
Stories about children going missing in the woods, people kept locked in basements.
But the story that really embedded itself in Scarlett's psyche was one her mom told about a mother who convinced her perfectly healthy young son that he was terribly sick.
Oh, that part was so hard to read.
It really was. She kept him indoors, fed him pills, told him he wasn't strong enough to play outside. And eventually the boy actually grew withered and pale, simply because he believed the lies his mother was feeding him.
That sounds like a textbook case of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. You know, that psychological disorder where a caretaker, usually a parent, makes up or actually causes physical illness in a child just to get sympathy and attention for themselves.
Yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like. And hearing a story like that from your own mother while driving to a psych ward, that leaves a massive psychological footprint on a kid.
It fundamentally altered her behavior. Scarlett admits that the story terrified her so deeply that for months afterward, she would hide the symptoms of her own, very real colds, from her parents.
She was terrified of becoming that withered little boy.
It's just heartbreaking. She couldn't even tell them she had the sniffles.
It also gives us the context we really need to understand the sibling dynamics in this house. Because trauma forces families into very specific roles, and Scarlett's siblings represent the two most common divergent paths. You have the older brother, Dex.
Right.
He is 3 years older, and his response to the chaos is flight. He completely opted out of the family pressure. I mean, he was smart enough for the Ivy League, but he chose to attend a local community college, purely so he could stay near his girlfriend, Gina.
He is building a simpler, insulated life as an escape hatch.
Exactly. And on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have the younger sister, Bridget. Even in elementary school, Bridget is incredibly astute. She recognizes that their large, physically imposing father is actually not emotionally strong enough to handle their mother's illness alone.
So Bridget's trauma response is to fix it. She steps up. She takes on the burden of helping with the hospital runs out of love.
Bridget is becoming what psychologists call parentified. That's when a child is forced to take on the emotional or practical responsibilities of the adult in the house.
So Dex fled. Bridget stepped up to manage the adults, and Scarlett is just paralyzed in the middle, frozen by a gift she can't control.
Precisely.
Which brings up a massive thematic question for you to consider while listening to this deep dive. We have this bloodline of women, Grandma Telsa, the mother, and now Scarlett. Is this gift truly a supernatural bloodline curse passed down through the generations?
Or are we just reading the perspective of a highly traumatized teenager who is misinterpreting the crushing inherited weight of severe generational mental illness?
Is the magic just a metaphor for madness?
It's the engine driving the entire narrative. But what is so crucial to understand is that for Scarlett, the distinction doesn't even matter.
Wow, yeah, that's true.
Whether it is a literal supernatural curse or a deeply ingrained psychological burden, the real-world result is exactly the same. She feels like a helpless passenger, she is isolated, she is terrified, and she is chronically anticipating the next disaster.
And that chronic anticipation sets up the absolute tragedy of her morning routine. We move right from the psychological weight of the past into the brutal reality of her present. Scarlett finally makes it downstairs after the cat attack. Her mom is actually home.
Right. She had a minor hospital visit the night before.
But now she's in the kitchen, drinking coffee, laughing. Things seem almost normal. But then Scarlett looks up and sees her little sister, Bridget, standing at the top of the wooden stairs.
And the mechanism of the gift activates.
A waking trance hits her instantly. A voice in her head simply says, she's going to fall. But the timing is agonizing. Before Scarlett can even snap fully out of the trance to yell a warning, Bridget is already in the air.
Scarlett reaches her arms out, but she's entirely too late.
Bridget falls down the stairs, crying out in pain and clutching her hurt arm.
This is the agony of the inevitable. The vision didn't give her enough time to prevent the tragedy. It only gave her enough time to be entirely present for her own failure to stop it. The gift isn't a tool, it's an instrument of psychological torture.
And the father's reaction in that moment compounds that torture so much. He rushes to Bridget, demanding to know what happened, and he glares at Scarlett, expecting an answer she can't articulate. And then, driven by his own fear and stress, he projects his anger onto Scarlett.
He yells at her to just get out and go to school.
He completely dismisses her.
It reinforces the exact narrative her brain is already telling her. that she is useless. She literally asks herself internally, would I have been able to stop it had the vision come any other time? She is carrying the guilt of the accident as if she pushed her sister down the stairs herself.
You've probably experienced that specific kind of paralysis at some point, right? Where you see the writing on the wall, maybe you realize a friend is about to make a terrible, life-altering mistake, or you see a project at work speeding toward a cliff.
Right, you can see it coming from a mile away.
You see the disaster coming, but the circumstances make you feel totally paralyzed to intervene in time. It is a universal human agony to watch a train wreck happen when your feet are glued to the floor. Now, take that relatable everyday feeling and amplify it by the intense magical reality Scarlett lives in.
It's unbearable.
That crushing weight is exactly what she is carrying as she walks through the front doors of Glory High School.
And a high school hallway is an incredibly dangerous place for someone carrying that kind of emotional weight. Predators in those environments have this dark empathy. They know exactly who is already bleeding.
Which brings us to Timothy Hiddleston.
Oh.
Yeah, Scarlett is barely through the doors before she is cornered by her personal tormentor. They've known each other since middle school, but Timothy is currently brimming with redirected aggression. He's this arrogant jock who was recently kicked off the football team because of hazing rumors.
He has been stripped of his own social power, so he is desperately seeking a target lower on the totem pole to regain a sense of dominance.
And Scarlett, whose entire outside persona is built around a desperate desire to be invisible, is the perfect, easy target.
She really is. He traps her by her locker and immediately starts mocking her for being late. But it's the precision of his cruelty that is so hard to read. He calls her witchy witch.
So mean.
He says, oh, let me guess you had a vision about a pop quiz and panicked. He is weaponizing the very rumors that cause her so much isolation. And then he goes straight for the most vulnerable spot he can find.
He mocks her clothes, asking loudly if she's wearing her mom's clothes today.
It is a devastating surgical strike. Given the raw emotional state Scarlett is in regarding her mother's hospitalization the night before and the guilt over her sister's fall that morning, bringing up the mother is the ultimate blow.
It's just evil.
Timothy's bullying isn't just physical intimidation. It's the real-world manifestation of the isolation her mind has already trapped her in.
And he finishes the interaction by loudly reminding her, right in front of his friends, that she is no one's buddy. He is verbally enforcing the physical and emotional quarantine she is already living in. It's brutal to watch, but it brings us full circle to what this source material is really achieving.
It takes the glamour out of the supernatural. This isn't a story about a girl who learns to harness her visions to save the city. It's a brilliant, heartbreaking metaphor for teenage alienation, the crushing physical toll of severe anxiety, and the immense collateral damage caused by a parent's unchecked mental illness.
Scarlett isn't trying to save the world. She's just trying to survive the battleground of her own mind, her fractured family, and the brutal hallways of her high school.
It makes you realize how terrifying it must be to be highly perceptive in an environment that actively refuses to listen to you, or worse, an environment that punishes you for what you can clearly see.
Which leaves us with a lingering, fascinating question that the text hints at but never fully resolves. The story explicitly mentions that both Scarlett's mother and her grandmother, Telsa, had reputations in their communities for fortune-telling.
Right, they had the gift too.
Yet her mother is repeatedly institutionalized. Her visions and manic stories are treated entirely as symptoms of a psychiatric disorder by the medical establishment and by her own husband.
So consider this. What if society's definition of clinical madness is sometimes just an overwhelming, unfiltered sensitivity to truths that the rest of us are simply blind to?
Oh, wow.
If her mother's dark, frantic stories in the back of that car were actually suppressed premonitions, what horrifying tragedies did her mother actually foresee but fail to stop? And did the crushing guilt of that inevitable failure drive her to the psych ward, just as it's currently driving Scarlett to the absolute edge?
That is a deeply chilling thought. You build a colorful castle to keep the monsters out, only to realize the monster is an inheritance you carry inside you. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the boundaries of the narratives you consume, and keep exploring those fascinating, murky gray areas between reality, trauma, and the unexplained. We'll see you next time.